It started on a chilly Thursday morning. Ali stood at his mailbox, shuffling through the usual pile of advertisements and bills when his eyes caught the gas company's logo. He tore open the envelope, expecting the usual numbers. Instead, what he saw made him blink twice. The amount was almost 3 times what he normally paid. "This has to be a mistake," he muttered, walking back to his modest 2-bedroom house. The home wasn't fancy, but it was his, and he'd worked hard for it. 5 years in the same neighborhood had taught him the rhythms of the place. The old man who walked his dog at exactly 6 a.m., the school bus that rumbled by at 7:30, and most importantly, how much his monthly bills should cost. Ali placed the bill on his kitchen table and made himself a cup of tea. Maybe there was a simple explanation. The gas company might have made an error. Winter was coming, but it wasn't that cold yet. He hadn't been using the heating more than usual. His hot water usage was the same as always. 1 shower each morning, dishes in the evening. Nothing had changed. "I'll give them a call," he decided, reaching for his phone while taking a sip of the steaming tea. The customer service representative was polite but unhelpful. "Sir, according to our records, your meter is showing this usage. If you believe there's an error, we can send a technician to check your meter, but there will be a service fee if no issues are found." Ali hesitated. The service fee wasn't small. But then again, neither was the bill in front of him. "Please send someone," he finally said. 2 days later, a technician in a blue uniform knocked on his door. Ali led him to the side of the house where the gas meter was installed. "How long have you been having high bills?" the technician asked, kneeling down to inspect the meter. "This is the 3rd month," Ali replied, suddenly realizing the previous 2 bills had also been higher than normal. He had blamed it on the changing seasons and paid without much thought. But this one is much worse. The technician checked everything, the meter itself, the connections, the pipes leading into the house. After 45 minutes of testing, he stood up and wiped his hands on a rag. "Everything looks normal," he said, looking genuinely puzzled. "The meter is working correctly, there are no leaks I can detect. But something's definitely causing high usage." "What could it be?" Ali asked, feeling his stomach tighten. "Hard to say. Could be an appliance malfunction. Could be..." The technician hesitated. "Look, I'm not supposed to suggest this, but sometimes people tap into other people's lines." Ali stared at him. "You mean someone could be stealing my gas?" The technician shrugged. "It happens. Not often, but it happens. I'd suggest monitoring your meter readings daily. See if there's a pattern." After the technician left, Ali found an old notebook and started a log. Every morning before work and every evening when he got home, he would go outside and write down the numbers on the meter. His neighbors occasionally gave him curious glances as he crouched by the meter with his notebook. Mrs. Patel from next door even asked if everything was all right. "Just checking something," Ali told her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. 6 days into his monitoring, Ali noticed something odd. He had been called into an emergency meeting at work and had to leave home by 6 a.m. When he returned at 4 p.m., exhausted from the long day, he went straight to the meter. The numbers had jumped significantly, much more than they should have, for a day when nobody was home. His house had been empty. The heating was off. No appliances were running except the refrigerator, which used electricity, not gas. Ali felt a cold sensation in his chest that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. Someone was definitely using his gas when he wasn't home. That night, he barely slept. His mind raced with possibilities. Who would do this? How were they doing it? He had lived in the neighborhood for years. He knew most of his neighbors, at least by sight. They were regular people, families, elderly couples, young professionals. The next morning, Ali called in sick to work. He needed to figure this out. Sitting at his kitchen table, he could see the gas meter through the window. Nothing looked unusual from this distance. He spent the morning researching online. He learned about different types of gas theft, how meters worked, and what signs to look for. By noon, he had a plan. Ali walked to the local electronics store and bought a small security camera that connected to his phone. It wasn't expensive, but it didn't need to be fancy. It just needed to work. Back home, he carefully installed the Euro camera under the eaves of the house, positioning it to have a clear view of the gas meter. The camera was motion-activated and would send alerts to his phone whenever it detected movement in that area. "Now we wait," Ali whispered to himself, checking that the camera was working correctly. He didn't know it yet, but this small act of vigilance would soon uncover a deception that had been happening right under his nose for months. The truth would test not only his patience but also his understanding of human desperation and his own capacity for justice, tempered with compassion. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across his yard, Ali watched a neighbor walk by with a wave. He waved back, wondering if the friendly gesture hid something darker. For the first time in 5 years, his home didn't feel quite as safe as it once had. 3 days passed with no alerts from the camera. Ali found himself checking his phone constantly, almost hoping to catch something just to confirm he wasn't being paranoid. The high bills were real enough, but maybe there was still some explanation he hadn't thought of. On the 4th night, Ali went to bed early. Work had been exhausting and he had a presentation the next morning. He placed his phone on the nightstand, made sure the volume was up so he'd hear any alerts, and drifted off to sleep. At 2:17 a.m., his phone buzzed loudly against the wooden surface. Ali jerked awake, his heart pounding. For a moment he was disoriented, unsure what had woken him. Then he remembered the camera and grabbed his phone. The notification showed a thumbnail of movement by his gas meter. With fumbling fingers, he tapped on it. The night vision footage wasn't crystal clear, but it was good enough. A figure crouched by his gas meter, working on something with focused attention. Ali sat up straight in bed, fully awake now. This wasn't just some animal wandering through his yard or a branch moving in the wind. This was a person, and not just any person. As the figure shifted position, the security light from his neighbor's house cast enough glow for Ali to recognize him. It was Faisal from next door, the man who had borrowed Ali's lawnmower last summer and returned it with a 6-pack of soda as thanks. The man who always waved from his driveway and commented on the weather. "No way," Ali whispered to himself, watching in disbelief. Faisal was attaching something to Ali's gas line, a long, dark tube that snaked across the ground and disappeared over the low fence separating their properties. The whole operation looked practiced, like he'd done it many times before. Ali watched the entire recording 3 times. Each viewing made him feel worse. The entire thing took about 15 minutes. Faisal hooked up the tube, checked something on his phone, maybe a timer, and then walked back to his own yard, moving carefully through the shadows. Sleep was impossible after that. Ali sat in his kitchen with the lights off, watching the darkness outside his window and thinking about what to do next. The betrayal stung more than the theft itself. He'd helped Faisal jumpstart his car during last winter's cold snap. They'd chatted about sports over the fence. Nothing close, but the normal neighborly relationship that made a community feel safe. All fake, apparently. When morning finally came, Ali called in sick to work again. He needed time to think. A confrontation right now, while he was still angry, might not end well. Better to gather more evidence first. After making himself a strong cup of coffee, Ali reviewed what he knew. The camera had caught Faisal in the act, but one video might not be enough if this went to the authorities. He needed to establish a pattern. Ali walked outside, careful to act normal in case anyone was watching. He checked his meter and wrote down the reading in his notebook. Then he casually strolled around his yard, looking for any signs of the tube he'd seen in the video. There was nothing visible now. Faisal must have removed it before daylight. Back inside, Ali pulled out his old bills and began calculating. If the normal monthly usage cost him about 5,000 rupees, and he'd been paying 15,000 for at least 6 months, then Faisal had stolen roughly 60,000 rupees worth of gas already, possibly more if it had been going on longer. Unbelievable, Ali muttered, pushing the bills away. That afternoon, while Faisal was at work, Ali took a risk. He walked along the fence line, examining the ground carefully. Near the back corner, partially hidden by an overgrown bush, he found what he was looking for: a small discolored patch where the grass had been repeatedly disturbed. He took photos with his phone, making sure to include landmarks that showed this was at the border of their properties. For the next week, Ali lived a double life. During the day, he went to work, smiled at neighbors, and pretended everything was normal. At night, he monitored the camera footage. Faisal didn't appear every night, but he came 3 more times that week, always between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., always with the same routine. Ali documented everything. He recorded meter readings before and after Faisal's visits. He saved every piece of video footage. He even set up a second camera from a different angle to get clearer footage of the connection. What he discovered was even more alarming than he'd initially thought. Faisal had installed a semi-permanent bypass system that allowed him to divert gas from Ali's line whenever he wanted. The tube Ali had seen was just the final connection point. The setup was not only stealing gas but was incredibly dangerous, an amateur job that could easily lead to leaks or worse. On the 8th night of surveillance, Ali decided to take one more step. He waited until just after midnight, dressed in dark clothes, and quietly made his way to the fence line with a powerful flashlight and his phone camera ready. When he was sure no one was watching, he took close-up photos of the connection point on his side. Clear evidence of tampering with the gas company's equipment. As he crept back to his house, a dog barked somewhere down the street. Ali froze, but no lights came on in Faisal's house. He made it inside safely, his heart hammering in his chest. Looking through the photos and videos he'd collected, Ali felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger at the theft, certainly. Disappointment in someone he'd considered a decent neighbor, but also an odd sense of satisfaction at having solved the mystery. Now came the hard part, deciding what to do with his evidence. Should he confront Faisal directly? Go to the police? Call the gas company? Each option had risks. A direct confrontation could turn ugly. The police might consider it too minor to pursue seriously. The gas company might just fix the bypass and send him on his way, leaving him to live next door to someone who now knew Ali had turned him in. Ali sat at his kitchen table until dawn, weighing his options. By the time the sun rose, casting golden light across his yard, he had made up his mind. He would need help, but not from the authorities, at least not yet. There was someone else he needed to talk to first. The morning air was crisp as Ali knocked on his friend Rashid's door. They had known each other since college, and Rashid now worked as a lawyer handling property disputes. If anyone could give him sound advice, it would be Rashid. "You look terrible," were Rashid's first words when he opened the door. "Come in, I'll make some tea." Ali hadn't slept properly in days. The discovery of Faisal's theft had left him constantly on edge. He followed Rashid into the kitchen and sat heavily at the small table. "I need your help," Ali said, pulling out his phone. "But first, you need to see this." Rashid watched the security footage with growing disbelief. When it finished, he let out a low whistle. "Your neighbor is stealing your gas? How long has this been going on?" "I'm not sure exactly," Ali replied, accepting the steaming cup of tea Rashid handed him. "At least 6 months based on when my bills started climbing. Maybe longer." "Have you confronted him?" Ali shook his head. "Not yet. I wanted to make sure I had enough evidence first. And honestly, I'm not sure what to do. That's why I'm here." Rashid leaned back in his chair thinking. "Show me everything you've got." For the next hour, Ali walked Rashid through all the evidence he had collected. The unusual bills, the meter readings, the videos from multiple nights, the photos of the connection point. "This is actually quite serious," Rashid said finally. "Not just theft, but tampering with gas lines could be considered endangerment. That connection he rigged up isn't safe. If there was a leak or a fire, people could get hurt." Ali hadn't even thought about that angle. The idea that Faisal's actions could have put his home or even his life at risk made his stomach turn. "So what should I do?" Ali asked. "Go to the police?" Rashid tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. "You could. They'd probably charge him, but court cases drag on and you'd still be living next door to him while it all played out." He paused. Let me ask you this, what do you want out of this? Punishment, your money back just to make it stop? It was a good question. Ali stared into his tea, trying to sort through his feelings. I want my money back, he said finally. And I definitely want it to stop, but mostly, he searched for the right words. Mostly I just feel betrayed. We weren't close friends, but I thought we were decent neighbors to each other. Finding out it was all a lie, that hurts. Rashid nodded. Then maybe there's a middle path. Something. Between doing nothing and calling the police. After leaving Rashid's house, Ali spent the rest of the day planning. He needed more precise evidence of exactly how much gas had been stolen. With his friend's advice in mind, he drove to the hardware store and bought an additional meter. Not an official one like the gas company used, but a flow meter that would help him track usage patterns more accurately. That evening, after making sure Faisal's car was gone, Ali carefully installed the meter on his own line, inside his property boundary. It wouldn't measure what had already been stolen, but it would give him more detailed information going forward. Over the next week, Ali created a spreadsheet tracking his usage hour by hour. The pattern became clear. Large amounts of gas disappeared between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., precisely when he was asleep and least likely to notice anything. By comparing his current bills with his typical usage from previous years, and cross-referencing with the new meter readings, Ali was able to calculate that Faisal had been stealing approximately 10,000 rupees worth of gas every month for at least a year. That added up to 120,000 rupees, a significant sum that represented months of hard work. But the money wasn't the worst part. One evening, when Faisal was out, Ali managed to get a better look at the bypass system from his side of the fence. What he saw made his blood run cold. The connection was shoddily done with electrical tape wrapped around joints that should have been properly sealed. In several places, the tape was already wearing thin, exposing the connection to the elements. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Ali took detailed photographs, being careful to stay on his own property. If there was ever any question about his evidence, he needed to make sure everything was obtained legally. That night, alone in his living room with all his evidence spread out on the coffee table, Ali felt a strange sense of calm. After 2 weeks of stress and sleepless nights, he finally had everything he needed. The photos, videos, meter readings, and calculations told a clear story. There was no doubt about what was happening. He called Rashid one more time. I have everything, he said when his friend answered. Enough to prove he's stolen at least 120,000 rupees worth of gas. That's grand theft, Rashid replied, sounding impressed. What are you going to do? Ali had given this question a lot of thought. I want to try your middle path idea. I'm going to talk to Uncle Bassett tomorrow. Uncle Bassett wasn't actually Ali's uncle, or anyone's uncle as far as Ali knew. He was an elderly man who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. People respected him, came to him with disputes, listened when he spoke. If anyone could help resolve this without making it worse, it would be him. That's smart, Rashid said. Do you want me there too? Yes, Ali admitted. I don't think Faisal will get violent or anything, but having a lawyer present might help keep things civilized. They made plans to meet at Uncle Bassett's house the next afternoon. That night, as Ali packed up his evidence into a folder, he felt strangely conflicted. Part of him was angry, justifiably so, at what Faisal had done. But another part felt sad that things had come to this. Whatever happened tomorrow would change their neighborhood forever. As he climbed into bed, Ali wondered what had driven Faisal to steal in the first place. Money problems? Greed? Opportunity? He realized he knew very little about the man who lived next door, despite their friendly waves and casual conversations about the weather. Perhaps that was part of modern life, living side by side with strangers, thinking you know them when you don't really know them at all. Uncle Basit's home smelled of cardamom tea and old books. At 75, he had lived in the neighborhood longer than most people had been alive. His wrinkled face carried the wisdom of decades, and his eyes missed nothing. Ali had always respected him, even as a child when Uncle Bassett would gently scold the local boys for playing cricket too close to Mrs. Qureshi's flower garden. So, you have a problem with your neighbor? Uncle Basit said after listening to Ali's story. The three men, Ali, Rashid, and Uncle Basit, sat in the old man's living room, surrounded by photos of children and grandchildren. Yes, Ali replied, spreading out the evidence on the coffee table. He's been stealing my gas for at least a year. I have proof. Uncle Basit examined the photos and videos carefully, his weathered hands steady as he picked up each piece of evidence. This is serious, he said finally. Not just the theft, but this connection could cause an explosion. Rashid nodded. That's what I told him. Uncle Basit looked at Ali with kind but serious eyes. What do you want to happen now? Ali had thought about this question a lot over the past few days. I want the stealing to stop, obviously, and I want my money back. It's a lot of money, but I don't necessarily want to ruin his life or create a war between us. We still have to live next to each other. The old man nodded approvingly. A measured response. Good. He thought for a moment, stroking his white beard. I think we should talk to him together. Sometimes people make poor choices when they're desperate. Other times they're just taking advantage. Either way, he needs to face what he's done. They agreed to approach Faisal that Saturday afternoon. It would give Uncle Basit time to discreetly ask around about Faisal's situation without spreading rumors about the theft. The day of the confrontation arrived warm and sunny, a stark contrast to the knot in Ali's stomach. He met Rashid and Uncle Basit at the old man's house first to go over their approach one more time. Let me do most of the talking at first, Uncle Basit advised. People are less defensive with an old man. His eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief that reminded Ali why the neighborhood children had always loved him, despite his occasional sternness. At exactly 3 o'clock, the three men walked the short distance to Faisal's house. Ali's hands were sweating as Uncle Basit knocked firmly on the door. A moment passed, then another. Just as Ali thought Faisal might not be home, the door swung open. Uncle Basit. Faisal's smile was warm and genuine until he noticed Ali and Rashid standing behind the old man. His expression changed instantly, not to hostility but to something more complicated. Confusion, maybe, or wariness. Faisal, we need to talk, Uncle Basit said gently. May we come in? Something in the old man's tone must have signaled the seriousness of the situation. Faisal's smile disappeared completely, replaced by a guarded look. After a moment's hesitation, he stepped back, opening the door wider. Of course, please come in. Faisal's living room was sparsely furnished but clean. A few toys in the corner suggested children lived there, though none were present now. He offered them seats and even started to ask if they wanted tea, but Uncle Basit gently cut him off. Faisal, we're here about a serious matter, the old man said, his voice firm but not unkind. Ali has discovered something troubling, and we wanted to address it directly with you before taking other steps. Faisal's eyes darted to Ali, then back to Uncle Basit. What is this about? Ali opened the folder he had brought and carefully laid out the first piece of evidence, a clear nighttime photo of Faisal connecting the gas line. The effect was immediate. Faisal's face drained of color. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. His eyes moved from the photo to Ali's face, then to Uncle Basit and finally to Rashid, who he seemed to notice properly for the first time. Are you a police officer? He asked Rashid, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm a lawyer, Rashid replied calmly. Ali's friend. Uncle Basit leaned forward slightly. Faisal, there's more evidence. Videos, calculations of how much gas was taken. The connection you made is also very dangerous. It could cause a fire or explosion. Ali watched as Faisal's shoulders slumped. The man seemed to physically shrink before their eyes, collapsing in on himself like a deflating balloon. I can explain, he began weakly. We'd like to hear it, Uncle Basit said, his tone neither accusing nor forgiving. Simply waiting. And so, Faisal talked. His story came out in bits and pieces at first, then in a rush of words. He had lost his job 8 months ago, laid off when the company downsized. With 2 young children and a wife who was studying to become a teacher, their savings had quickly disappeared. He'd found part-time work, but it wasn't enough. The gas bill was the first thing I couldn't pay, he explained, staring at his hands. It was winter and the children were cold. I'm good with my hands. I used to do maintenance work. I thought it would just be temporary, just to get through the month until I found something better. But you kept doing it, Ali said, speaking. For the first time since they'd entered the house. Faisal nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Each month I told myself it would be the last time, but then another bill would come and I still didn't have enough. His voice trailed off. I'm not trying to make excuses. What I did was wrong. I know that. The room fell silent. Ali felt a complicated mix of emotions, anger at the theft, but also a twinge of sympathy. He looked at Uncle Bassett, who nodded slightly, encouraging him to speak. The gas you've taken adds up to about 120,000 rupees, Ali said, his voice steadier than he felt. And the connection is dangerous. It needs to be removed today. Faisal looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. What are you going to do, call the police? It was the moment of decision. Ali glanced at Rashid, who gave a small nod, then at Uncle Basit, whose wise eyes watched him carefully. That depends on what happens next, Ali replied, surprised at the calmness in his own voice. He was no longer shaking inside. The confrontation he'd dreaded for days was happening, and somehow he felt equal to it. I want 3 things, Ali said, looking directly at Faisal. First, the connection has to be removed today, right now. Second, you need to pay back what you took. We can work out a payment plan. And third, he paused, I need to know this. Won't happen again. Uncle Basit nodded approvingly. Rashid remained silent, letting Ali handle the negotiation. Faisal looked relieved. Clearly, he had expected worse. I can remove it right now, he said quickly. And I'll pay you back. Every rupee, I promise. How? Ali asked. You said yourself you can't even pay your own bills. Faisal hesitated, then stood up. Let me show you something. He led them to a small room off the living room that had been converted into a workshop. Inside were several beautiful wooden tables in various stages of completion. The craftsmanship was impressive, intricate designs carved into rich, dark wood. I've been making furniture in the evenings and weekends, Faisal explained. I'm trying to start a small business. I have orders, but not enough to support my family yet. Another month or 2 and I think I can make it work. Ali ran his hand over the smooth surface of a nearly completed coffee table. It was genuinely beautiful work. You're talented, he admitted. I'll give you the first table that sells, Faisal offered, and then regular payments until everything is paid back. Uncle Basit cleared his throat. The illegal connection first. Then we talk payment. Under their watchful eyes, Faisal gathered tools and led them outside. The afternoon sun beat down as he knelt by the fence between the properties. With Ali and Rashid watching carefully to ensure he didn't remove any evidence, Faisal dismantled the dangerous bypass system. It took nearly an hour of careful work. When it was done, Faisal handed Ali a tangled mess of tubes and connectors. I'm sorry, he said simply. I was desperate, but that's no excuse. Back inside, gathered around Faisal's kitchen table, they worked out the terms of repayment. Rashid wrote everything down, 10,000 rupees per month until the full 120,000 was repaid. Faisal would also fix the minor damage to Ali's yard where the connection had been. What about the gas company? Faisal asked nervously. Will you tell them? Ali had thought about this. No, he decided. As long as you stick to our agreement. The connection is gone. That's what matters for safety. But, he added firmly, if you miss even one payment, I'll go to them and the police with all my evidence. Faisal nodded, understanding the seriousness of Ali's words. Before they left, Uncle Basit had one more question for Faisal. Your children and wife, do they have enough to eat? The question seemed to catch Faisal off guard. His eyes welled up, but he quickly blinked back the tears. We manage, he said softly. Uncle Basit nodded thoughtfully. The community fund at the mosque might be able to help with some basics until your business grows. I'll speak with them. Not about this. He gestured to the dismantled gas connection. But about a family in need. Faisal looked down, embarrassed, but grateful. Thank you, he whispered. As they walked back to Uncle Bassett's house, Ali felt emotionally drained but also strangely at peace. The confrontation he had dreaded for weeks was over. The illegal connection was gone. A plan was in place. You handled that well, Rashid told him. Firm but fair. Indeed, Uncle Bassett agreed. Justice tempered with mercy is always the wiser path. 3 days later, Ali noticed a worker from the gas company checking meters in the neighborhood. Impulse, he approached the man and asked about ways to make his meter more secure. We've had some cases of tampering in this area, the worker told him, installing a simple lock system at no charge. This should help. That night, Ali slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The first payment from Faisal came exactly as promised, 10,000 rupees in cash, handed over awkwardly at the fence between their properties. Ali wrote a receipt and gave it to Faisal without comment. The second month's payment came with news. Faisal had sold 3 tables to a new restaurant, opening downtown. His business was growing. By the third month, their exchanges became slightly less strained. They weren't friends, probably never would be, but a cautious civility had returned to their interactions. One evening, 6 months into the repayment plan, Ali arrived home to find Faisal waiting by the fence with an envelope. I got a real job, Faisal told him, a hint of pride in his voice. A furniture company saw my work and hired me as a designer. I'll still do my own pieces on the side, but this means steady income. He handed Ali the envelope. This is 3 months' payment in advance. Ali accepted the envelope with surprise. Congratulations on the job. Faisal nodded, then hesitated. I want to say something. What I did was wrong. Really wrong, I know that. But the way you handled it... He struggled for words. You could have ruined me, had me arrested. Instead, you gave me a chance to fix things. My children still have their father at home because of that. I won't forget it. Before Ali could respond, Faisal had turned and walked back to his house. That night, sitting in his living room, Ali thought about how differently things might have gone. The anger and betrayal he'd felt had been real, justified even. But ultimately, what had been gained by the path they'd chosen? Faisal was repaying his debt. The dangerous connection was gone. No one had been hurt or imprisoned, and somehow something that could have destroyed their neighborhood's peace had instead revealed its strength. Ali glanced out his window at the homes around him, warm lights glowing in windows as families settled in for the evening. He knew these neighbors better now, not just their names and faces, but Uncle Bassett's wisdom, Rashid's loyal friendship, even Faisal's desperate choices and skilled hands. The modern world made it easy to live side by side with people without truly knowing them. But this strange, difficult experience had reminded Ali of something important. Neighborhoods weren't just collections of houses. They were communities of people, flawed, struggling, resilient people, all trying to make their way as best they could. And sometimes, even in the midst of betrayal, there was room for understanding. Not forgetting, not excusing, but understanding. Ali wasn't sure if that was wisdom or simply weariness. Either way, as he turned away from the window and back to his quiet home, he found he could live with it.